Hello, Franklin County. This is Franklin County Commissioner Kevin Boyce. It's Wednesday, it's 3 o'clock, and so you know what time it is. A brotherly conversation about health, wealth, and race in Franklin County in Central Ohio. Today, I got with me my friends. In politics, you meet a lot of people, and over time, they become associates, they become whatever. But I got three people that I consider friends that are, I would say, frontliners. These are folks who are on the front line of the fight. The role that they play in this community is a direct engagement on all of the issues that we struggle with to improve in Central Ohio. And so I've got some fabulous guests I want to introduce them to. You all know them. By the way, if I get any more DMs about my beard, I'm growing a beard, darn it. And I don't care what you say. And I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care if it doesn't grow in and fill out. It is my duty to grow a beard. It's how I'm just feeling beardly today. So that's my 2 cents on the beard. And I'm sure I'll get, 10 DMs about that. But
it's a dude thing. It's a dude thing.
It's a dude thing. Your facial hair is everything. Somebody said the other day that facial hair to men is like makeup to women. It's true. It was a woman that said that to me. There's a woman that said it to me. So I'm just saying.
It's true.
It's our thing,
But Kevin, you have the same problem that my son has.
First of all, I don't have a problem. Okay. I don't have a problem. My beard is okay. And Franklin County residents will attest to this when they call in and they say something. Okay. So I got good guests with me today, and I want to introduce them. And I'm just really thrilled and excited. First, let me introduce my good friend, the longest friend of the three here, which is Maryellen O'Shaughnessy. I've known her forever, everybody. And we served on Columbus City Council together for almost a decade. And it was tough serving with her. I'm just tell you, it was hard. She's very difficult to get along with and to work with. She got all these ideas and these things she wants to do, and you can't keep up. No, I'm kidding. She was wonderful to work with. One of my closest friends, and I'm just so thrilled that I have the ability to serve with you. But she's done a lot of things in Central Ohio. One of the things you don't know about her is her equestrian and her horse riding ability. So we'll have you tell us a little bit about that, at some point. But there's other stuff I know about her I can share with you all too. If you're interested, just write in the question. So good to have you, Maryellen.
I'll be the last to let you down.
That's right. She's a funeral home operator.
Funeral director.
Director. I'm sorry. Director.
I've been a funeral director next year for 25 years.
25 years.
Wow.
Well, I just turned 25, and so I
think right.
Quite fitting. So welcome to the show, Maryellen. Thank you so much. Appreciate you watching each week, and thanks for coming on this week. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
My other friend, Beryl Anderson. I don't know how long I've known you. I don't even know. But we were like, parents at the same school together. We have just been in the community, but you've been at the front lines, and you're in Gahanna doing your thing, but you got a long history too. So we're going to have you share a little bit about that. And it's just great to have you, and good to see you too. You look wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now this guy, Ken Wilson. Yeah, actually, I take that back, Maryellen. I haven't known you. I've known Ken I've known Ken longer than I known you. I forgot. Because Ken and I were staffers back on the day in the General Assembly.
I have no idea.
Ken worked over on the Senate side, and I worked on the House side. But what year did you start in the Senate, Ken?
92.
So he was there before I was. I got there in 94, 5-ish.
Yeah.
And so man, I've known you my whole political life here then. So I didn't realize that. But Ken Wilson is the county administrator. And let me explain, if you don't understand what the county administrator is, those watching, you got the county commissioners, and we are elected. And so I would describe us as the top of the heap, if you will. And so we're kind of the, overseers of Franklin County, if you will, in many ways. But our top, what I would describe as our top staff person is Ken Wilson, and he oversees the day-to-day operations and the management of the county. And so he's kind of, where the rubber meets the road. He kind of, I would describe him as a frontliner. You know, you see those lines in his head right there. He didn't have all those lines when he started. Now they're kind of permanent. You know, and there's two right there. I see another one that just came up from the last couple months. But welcome, Ken. Thanks for being here, my friend.
Thank you for having me on, Commissioner.
Yeah, of course. So, you know, what I've been telling everybody is when they come on, the first question I ask everybody, one, I want you to give us a little, you know, elevator, you know, tell us about your background so everybody knows you, knows, you know, where you come from. So your quickest sort of here's who I am. But the question I have to you that I've asked everybody is 2020 has been a hell of a year. I mean, just we started off with a global pandemic. We shut down our community. We shut down the economy. And then there was the tragedy of the death of George Floyd that really sent us in a tailspin around unrest and frustration and demonstration. And here we are in October, and there's no vaccine. We don't know where the bottom for the economy is. And quite frankly, anxiety is probably at its height. And so if there was one word that you could describe 2020 for you, what would that one word be? I'm going to give you a second. You're pondering now. I can tell, you know, Beryl and Maryellen, you're all in this. Ken knows his word. Ken already got his word. So I'm going to go Ken first while you two think deeply about your word. And for those who you're viewing, I want to know what your word is too. What's your word for 2020? Ken, what's your word?
My word would be urgency.
Ooh, urgency.
Good word.
Urgency. And Ken, while they're thinking, give us the 30-second who Ken Wilson is. Tell us a little bit more about you. What did I leave out?
As you stated, been in public service, coming up on 3 decades, have spent a great amount of time in the public finance space, and over time, broad net work to administration. But my career has been rooted in public policy, working on state budgets, moved from state budgets to county budgets. And so that has been grounded.
Good. Okay.
I've had a keen interest in economic development and creating greater opportunities for the underserved and disadvantaged in different communities that I've worked for, both at the state and now local levels.
Okay. Okay. I mean, they're getting much better than that, and the great thing about it, of all of the things that he's done, he has become a master Zoom operator. Look at him. He's perfectly positioned on the camera. He's got his other computer on. That's Zoom perfection right there, man. And I just want to say that because, there's usually one person that's on here and they're like this, the whole time, see Maryellen, see, and I know it's going to be somebody, that comes back with this, but you all look good. Thanks, Ken. I like the word urgency. Bro, what do you think? What's your word? And then maybe give us a little bit about yourself too. Well, give us a little bit about yourself first and then tell me your word.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Beryl Anderson. I am a person who believes in balancing your life as much as possible. So before I get to the professional, I'm a mommy. I'm a wife. I think that being introspective is very important, and that's part of what we're going through in this pandemic, as well as many challenges which cause you to be reflective. Who am I? Professionally, I'm a lawyer who also has used that degree to leverage it into media. As was stated at the beginning, I used to work for the Supreme Court and actually worked for a media outlet and was part of the Supreme Court Press Corps. I was the first African-American to be a full-time.
And that's the U.S. Supreme Court. That's the U.S.
United States Supreme Court.
United States Supreme Court. There's a difference.
United States Supreme Court. And so that meant I also interfaced with the White House and Congress and all the different agencies. And during that time, through the Bar Association, there was a program called Cameras in the Courts. And so I had to look at all the cases around the United States to figure out who was going to let us have cameras there and be camera ready. Also, with my interest in covering events and policy, I now in Ohio have been more involved with that as a 3-term city council person, also a city commissioner. I'm also the former deputy secretary of state. And I have had the honor, as I look back during my reflection during this period, to work with some amazing icons. I thank my parents for giving me the wind beneath my wings. And some of those people include John Lewis, include Rosa Parks, who was like a grandmother to me. I traveled around the country with her. And so those people there are many more, but as I reflect, I see how those people have poured into me. And in that being a part of me and them always being a part of my soul, that invigorates me, Kevin, and it invigorates me, the rest of the panel, to move forward, because we are so blessed to be living in this time and to be change agents. Every generation has something that is theirs to do. So ours is dealing with the pandemic and all the stuff that's going on now.
So you set yourself up for a very big word now. You know that, right? Now with all that, the crescendo, you got to have a super word for 2020 with all that.
What popped in my mind at first is transformative, because we are going through a change, a challenge. All our institutions are being uprooted. We're being forced to look at them, to figure out different ways to do things and to function so that we can move forward. And at the same time, Kevin, at the same time, to look within, because change is an inside job. Looking within, going through the process of figuring out who you are as a person, and then moving forward and taking those strengths and your gifts and talents to help to be a change agent to move humanity forward. Wow. And that's what, that's what I try to do every day.
Well, that was a good word. That was a good word too. Okay. All right. So Maryellen, now you've had the time to hear, urgency and transformation. So your word should be just, big. But before you give us your word, tell us a little more about what do we not know about Maryellen O'Shaughnessy?
Well, there's plenty, but I don't know whether we want to talk about all that. I was just enjoying listening to Beryl. Boy, that was wonderful, wonderful stuff. And when it comes to words, the first word that came up, of course, because of our earlier conversation about your bad joke, Kevin, was it's been a tense year. But then I thought, it's an angry year. Everybody's just angry. But then I thought,
which word is it? You can't. It's one word. You cannot. You're breaking the rules. You're breaking the rules. You cannot say I would have used these 3 words and then this word. That's breaking the rules.
Going through listening to everybody else, and I was getting so inspired. That perseverance is really it. And Beryl brought that up. We must persevere. We must prevail through all this. That this year has beat us down. It's been hard. And yet we rise, right? Yeah. We must continue, and we must learn from this and make a better world out of it. And that's certainly what I'm committed to, and everybody else is. I'm a 5th generation Columbus person, which is an unusual thing. My great grandparents came here in the 1860s, so I got those deep roots here. A Catholic kid growing up Catholic in uppity Arlington, which is what my father always called it, because he was a North End Irish. And when they moved to Arlington, it took him, I don't think he ever adjusted, actually. So it gives me a different perspective on things. And it also, we have moments in our lives where we get wake-up calls. This is a wake-up call. This year has really gotten people's attention, and I believe that furthering the cause of justice comes in fits and starts. I lived through I dropped out of school first time in 1970 during the riots when the kids were killed at Kent State, because the riots were enormous at Ohio State, and I got out. I didn't want to have anything to do with it, and it was there was a racial component to that. It was Nixon was invading Cambodia, but also there was an uprising amongst the kids, the African American kids who were going to Ohio State, about making sure that they had racial justice there, and the numbers were way too small, and they continue to be too small. So this is a wake-up call for everybody. Let's get let's get more diversity at Ohio State. Let's get more let's take this to the next level. So yeah, it's been difficult to go through the riots. Because it's like flashbacks, and seeing you get pepper sprayed, Kevin. Ooh, yeah, I lived through some pepper spray on the Oval at Ohio State, so it is not good stuff, So,
you have some really interesting points. I mean, let me first by just talking about the words. I mean, urgency, transformative, and then perseverance, I think, are really important words that honestly no one has said. Sometimes you get on these shows and the same kind of words come up. Exhaustion, anxiety, words like that, even hope in some words. These are three words that have not come up, and I just couldn't agree with them more. That no matter what position you're in Central Ohio or even in America, 2020 has affected you in a way that we know that going forward, something else is happening. That's the, I think, consistency among all the words is that, whether it's the urgency, the as they say, the fierce urgency of now, or, transformation in what's happening to our country, or even perseverance. We're still getting through these challenges. We know that there is something next. But I think you touched on something that really is appropriate for our first topic. And that's, the Supreme Court has been active this year in a number of ways. And just the other day, just yesterday, I believe, a new ruling came down on the census. And basically, they ruled essentially that the president can stop the census. The original date was back in July, I believe. I think, is that right, Ken? I think so, the original date. And then with COVID-19, it was moved out to October. And now with the president wanting to stop it, it's going to be abruptly. So I think it stopped today. I think, or maybe it stops today.
Tomorrow.
Right? Yeah. No, I think tomorrow. Okay.
Tomorrow, 11:59
p.m.
At 7:59 p.m. So let's talk about that for a second. One, let's talk about just how critical the census is to what you do and the roles that you all play, and maybe talk about if you agree with the Supreme Court, given the COVID-19 environment. Do you agree that we should end it now and move on to other things, or should we, accommodate for this kind of environment? Ken, since I started with you in the introduction, I'm going to start with Maryellen on this, and we'll go the opposite direction. And so, Maryellen, you go first. Beryl, you go next, and then Ken, bring it home.
Okay.
Yeah, Ken is the expert on this, but I can tell you, in our conversations earlier, we were talking about how important it is to get everyone counted. And in this difficult environment, it's been hard, and people are not paying attention to this. And we need to do everything we can in the next 12 to 24 hours to get more people counted. Now, it's allocation of resources, I mean, we talked about that. You're paying taxes, right? You're paying taxes to the federal government. That is allocated back to us per census numbers. So, if you're paying taxes and you want them to come back here to help our community, make sure you get on get online and do your census. It's really important, and everyone needs to be counted. It's going to make a huge difference. So yeah, I'll punt to Beryl.
Can you think of a situation where the clerk's office uses census data for? Is there any sort of direct planning or things that you all think about when you use census data, or not so much?
nothing that I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm sure that there is. We talk about, again, allocation of resources when we're the biggest clerk of courts office in the state because of the population here, and the population is counted through the census. So so that has a lot to do with the budget that we negotiate with you and Ken, which is probably the biggest in the state. When it comes to clerk of courts offices, but yeah. So again, allocation of resources. It's about that. It's about getting your tax dollars back here so that we can use them wisely in the work that we do.
Yeah, for all the things that we care about, education, our schools, healthcare in many ways, infrastructure on so many levels. Beryl, you wear a lot of hats in this conversation and bring a bunch of different perspectives. And so what's your thoughts before you start to comment? Let me give a shout out to Brittany McCrary that's watching, Shakuri Ado that's watching, Marsha White and Robin Walton, my auntie. Hey, auntie, thanks for joining us today. I miss you. Call me. We got to catch up with some stuff. Did you talk to mom the other day? Because then I'm sorry, I've got those. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Beryl. It's census.
And
Supreme Court.
Supreme Court. I want to hear about
Supreme Court. Yes. Okay. Well, no, actually, I just thought another thing that I didn't say about me is before I became Deputy Secretary of State, I worked for the Census Monitoring Board in the Washington, D.C. area. So the Census Monitoring Board has oversight for the census, how it's put together, how it's executed. Are we really getting the undercount? We had teams of people that went to the Mississippi Delta, to Native American home areas we call reservations, so that we could get a broad view, because the execution was key. And then when I came to Ohio, I was with the Count Me in Ohio program that the governor and the Secretary of State were involved in. So one of the things that comes to mind, there are many, is getting the message out as much as possible. That has been curtailed by COVID, or it has been retarded some by COVID. But by the same token, we got to be instrumental in just finding ways. Do I agree with the Supreme Court? No, because one of the reasons this case was brought is that a report has to get to the president by the end of the year. And there are ways in which we could have asked for extensions and made it so that more people could be counted. But you got politics on both sides. Probably given the fact pattern the Supreme Court had, that is how they came to this particular conclusion. We don't have Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg as another vote, even only one person dissented. So that kind of signals what kind of times that we're living in, because as was said, resources are key. One situation that I thought of as it relates to this is, when I was with Count Me in Ohio, there was a town here that was a village, and they needed to have 5,000 people to become a town. Wow. And we went to that city and we knocked on doors. And I know, this is different. We got COVID, but the point of my sharing this is to bring home the fact that I don't think that most people realize, even still, the importance of the census, that those dollars go back into your community. Those dollars impact apportionment. Those dollars, or rather the dollars impact the schools, the businesses. When businesses come to a particular city, they're looking at the overall aspect of the city, not just like what kind of tax breaks they could get and what kind of marketing they can do, but if future employees have kids, what is the school like? What is the school rating? What is the school district like? All kinds of things impact people's salaries. And that when we went to that town in Ohio, there was a difference made because we got over 5,000 people, so they weren't a village anymore. It impacts salaries. It impacts the number of people you can even hire. It impacts so many things. Yeah. And as I said, I don't think a lot of people realize the broad ramifications of the census. In addition, in this particular census, there were questions of whether or not people were truly citizens or document, you know, those.
At least he wanted, the president wanted to include that question.
Yes, and thank you. And it is something that really raised people's eyebrows as to whether or not that could, you know, like, what are they doing? And in general, people want to know, why does the government want to know my business? So that's some of the reasons why people don't fill out the census. So it's a catch-22. I'm just sad that many cities, not just the Columbus area, have not been able to count everybody, but it's going to impact us long term.
Yep.
And lastly, representation. How many Congress people you have depends on the census.
Crucial. It's crucial. I mean, when you think about CARES Act dollars and how they were allocated to counties like Franklin County, you know, that's a direct connection to the people who represent us in Congress. And so that's a critical one. It's critical. Yeah.
And how those lines are drawn.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Ken, bring us home on this question. I mean, you know, you saw the ruling, you know what the county has invested in this conversation, and there's probably no one that's more steeped in the data as relates to census, you know, than you, because you have to advise us on the decisions based on, you know, people numbers. So, I mean, what's your thought on the ruling? What's your, do you agree with it?
Well, I disagree with the ruling, of course. It's unfortunate that you would want to shorten a timeline when we're talking about individuals in communities being represented and being accounted for. And when individuals equal dollars coming into a community and there's efforts to suppress that, it's tragic. And the thing about the census is this: you only have one chance every 10 years to get it right. You don't get a do-over for 10 years. We're talking about billions of dollars at stake for affordable housing, dollars for early education, Head Start, dollars for infrastructure. You know, people don't want to come into communities that are lacking the resources for infrastructure, to have sound roads and to have access to internet and broadband services. As we've learned during this pandemic, Wi-Fi access is a public utility. Kids need that. Even if they're fortunate enough to be transitioning back to school in some hybrid form, they need to have access to broadband in order to reach their lesson plan. And as Ms. Anderson spoke to, it's political representation.
Yeah.
You're talking about the census is going to impact 2 presidential elections directly as a result of how many people are counted, the 2024 and the 2028 elections. And when you talk about, you're looking at the Electoral College, and literally the results of this census is going to dictate how many electoral votes that each state has. And as we all know, politics and power go together, and it determines the distribution of resources. And historically, areas that need it the most are the toughest areas to count, and it's where the undercount occurs.
And often they have a pigmentation, you know, with in terms of undercount.
Right. And you think about it like this, and every person that's missed being counted in Franklin County, we're gonna lose an estimated $1,206.
Wow.
And that just
per year per person.
And ironically, that just happens to tie into the stimulus check amount that individuals got one check as a maximum amount. And now we're talking about that compounded over 10 years. As you stated, Commissioner, they equal $12,060 over a 10-year period.
Times the number of people that were counted.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the census is huge. And as a community, we don't have long. Right now, last check, we were at 68.2% as a community.
So we're pleading with you folks, if you're out there, you haven't done your census, You got to do it right now. You can go to my2020census.gov. That's my2020census.gov. You can fill it out. I'm telling you, I did it, and I started to drink a little bit of water, and even as I was doing it, and I finished the water. I mean, I finished typing in my questions before I even got halfway through the glass. That's how quick it is. You know, it doesn't take any kind of energy, and we need those resources, and we're going to especially need them in 2021, especially
Absolutely.
need them in 2021. And so, I mean, I think you touched on something else that I just want to drive right into, and that's this conversation around race, because embedded in the census is a illustration or demonstration of who lives in Central Ohio. And particularly for African Americans, you all know that Franklin County declared race as a public health crisis. And embedded in that are a number of statistics that are crucial and come from census data. But let's talk about race for a second. I mean, you know, the death of George Floyd, I think, was almost like an accelerant to a conversation that was already sort of happening, but it brought it to the forefront where everybody got involved. And I think it was Beryl, you mentioned it, I think. Oh, no, it was Maryellen that mentioned back in the 70s during the Vietnam era and some of the, unrest and pushback. But here's one thing that I feel like is different. Now, I was born in 71, so but I was around am I the youngest person on this phone call? Oh my, I don't think I've been the youngest person on a phone call in a long time, starting to be like the old person on this. This is crazy. I'm the youngest. Ken, I'm younger than you, right?
Yes, sir.
Oh man,
you mention that often. It's not the first time you mentioned that. Yeah, not the first time you mentioned that, but okay, I'll let you have that.
Did I mention that I'm the youngest on the, okay, I did say, okay, yeah. So so 1992 was the first time that I really saw unrest play out when the Rodney King, situation happened. And the one thing I feel like that is different from 1992 to now, there's two things actually. One is the cameras. There are cameras everywhere. Everybody got a camera, phone, and so you can see it every day. That's right. I got mine right here. I haven't checked it in 30 minutes. I'm gonna have 99 messages on here. But the difference today is when myself and Joyce Beatty and Shannon were down there. I'll tell you, one of the differences I saw were there were as many white people down there as there were black people. And they were as frustrated, they were as angry, they were as urgent and transformative and persevering as everybody that I saw. And I think that's a difference. And I think now you're starting to see, all these corporations, Netflix, the NFL, Chase, Huntington, everyone has said, you know what, we need to do our part because it's time for change. And so let's talk about this for a minute. Do you feel like this is something that is sustainable? Do you feel like something different is happening in the country? I mean, you said, I'll start with you, Beryl. You used the word transformative, and so that would imply that change, that something different is happening. Is that where you're going with this? That this conversation around race is changing right before our eyes?
Yes, I think that we are the generation. This time period that we're all living in is changing how we look at each other, and it's not just in the United States; it's around the world. For George Floyd, it wasn't just America marching. We saw pictures in France. We saw pictures in England. We saw pictures in Australia. Black folks around the world experiencing the same thing, and the white allies are right there with those folks, with us marching, as you said. This is a worldwide phenomenon where we are being forced, we humankind are being forced to look within as well as look without, outside of ourselves, so that we can see our common humanity. There also is an imbalance in terms of economics and resources. How is it only 1% of the population has most of the wealth? We can't survive as a planet like that. There's some people that think that there are too many people on the planet because of the resources. people have all kind of ideas, but the point is we are being forced to look at ourselves, look at situations, and then figure out how we're going to transform whatever that particular institution is for the betterment of those who are taking advantage. When I say take advantage, I don't mean in a negative way, but for those who are utilizing whatever that resource is, that institution, the particular things that would make us move forward as one humanity. Mm-hmm. And it's hard work.
Yeah.
It's hard work. I mean, some people go to therapy and they do that, but you know what? We're all being impacted because we are all going through some level of grief.
But so you think it's changing though? You think, it is changing into something different?
Absolutely.
This is what I hear you saying. Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
We will get on the other side eventually, but we have to go through the hard work of doing what we need to do to make that change. Change is not easy. And you got people, because of the way things are set up now, they're polarized, the division and the polarization. So it's good.
And the conversation around race divides us even further. It draws, even a greater divide often. And I mean, in fact, that's why we really dug into the poverty work. And that's the major element that we found was race as a critical factor. But I think you're spot on.
Thank you. And I also would say the disparities are coming up. There's a bright light being shined on economic disparities, housing disparities, healthcare disparities. I mean, you name it. And we don't have to wait for the journalist to do a story on it. If you notice, there used to be a whole lot of stories on healthcare disparities. You're not hearing that as much anymore. But you know what? Those healthcare disparities still exist. The housing, the economic, we just talked about the census. That's going to create even more disparities. The economics is inherent in that. If you don't have the money, then you're going to have food insecurity. You're going to have all kind of issues that will cause us to think about the balance of money and how we share those resources with each other. And as we go through that transition and transformation, we will hopefully get to the other side on the same page, and hopefully sooner than later, because this is tough. This is tough. Schools are talking about this. You mean we just talked about our kids? Schools are talking about it. Some schools are open. I mean, some schools are online, and some schools are in person. Some schools have certain resources and other schools don't have those certain resources. Some kids have Wi-Fi, some don't. Some have computers, some don't. Some have food, some don't.
Yeah.
All of that. Some people have jobs, some don't. Some don't have any more money from the stimulus.
Well, let's keep this going, but I'm gonna interject some of our online questions because people are responding to some of this, and I want to include our viewers. I want to include them. So I'm gonna change the question a little bit, but I'm gonna go to one of the questions that I think still stay in this realm, and you can mix in your answers. And let me just give a quick shout out to Sarah Wunsch, I believe that is, Jonathan Bentley, and my main man, Charles Hill. Good to see you, man. We got to catch up. It's been a couple weeks. We need to catch up, bro. And then Roxy Wise, thank you so much for watching. That's a new name, but thanks so much for watching. And Angel Tyree from Los Angeles, California is watching us and ask a question. And Angel is from Columbus, so I know the name. She's from Columbus, and she says, but okay, is this a moment or a movement? Not including the census, how are we going to create this lasting change? And I think that is a legit question. Thank you, Angel, for asking that question. And I'll start with you, Maryellen. She asked the question, is this a moment or a movement? And not including the census, how are we going to create lasting change?
Yeah, I'm hoping it's a movement. I think it's up to us to make sure that it continues to move. I think it's up to us to make sure that we're having those difficult discussions. White folks have avoided these discussions for a long time. They kind of want to say, oh, everything's fine now, President Obama and everything's fine. We've got racial equity. But it's just as clear as what Beryl said, that we do not. And we have to have those difficult discussions. And we have to learn ways to talk together to get people to realize, hey, I knew a Black guy once, It's like, what?
Right. My neighbor's Black. My neighbor's Black.
Right. I knew a Black guy. I went to school with a Black guy. I remember that. I remember what's his name? Yeah. We've got to have the difficult discussions. We have to bring up every area that Beryl talked about, because really this goes back, Kevin, and you talked about racism as a public health crisis. Mm-hmm. People think maybe the county commissioners just came up with that, but I was there with the first discussions when you decided to do a deep dive on poverty. Mm-hmm. And we were going to do a deep dive, and there were community conversations about this is what we're doing. We're investing a couple of years of real thoughtful investigation as to why we have such disparity in the haves and have-nots in Franklin County. And they unpacked it piece by piece by piece, every area that Beryl was talking about, and saw that racism was at the core of it. Racism was at the core of it. And so this is, it wasn't something that just flew out of Kevin's head. This was, there's research, several years of research that brought it to that one conclusion, that racism is indeed a public health crisis in Franklin County and elsewhere. And we need to continue to have that discussion about how we can do better on racial equity. Honestly.
And I gotta say, I gotta say, I serve with two really wonderful people, Maryellen Brown and John O'Grady, my colleagues as commissioners, and they have been so vested and so dug into this conversation that when we started it in 2018, I knew we were headed down a path of real pioneership in terms of being able to lead a conversation. But when we passed the resolution, we were in the Zoom situation already by then, I believe, if I remember correctly. There almost wasn't a dry eye on the Zoom call, because there was a lot of passion behind the discussion of the mistakes that we've made as a country. But more importantly, trying to just start a conversation on a path what everyone wants to say about the resolution. Oh, what does that really mean? I said, well, it means a lot because it's a value proposition. It says that we as Franklin County leaders understand this conversation in race. And more importantly, we're going to find a way to invest in changing what we know is creating disparate numbers. And so, so I agree. I think it is a movement, but Angel, it starts with people like yourself. It starts with everyone being a part of it. The county commissioners we don't have a button where we push and the movement starts, and we can't control. It requires everyday people, leaders in the neighborhood, in the community, saying that I too want to join in this conversation. And Administrator Wilson, you're our, if I think of you as the quarterback, I think of, if I like football. And so when I think of, Administrator Wilson, I think of he's the, we're the coaches and the owners of the team, us elected officials, but he's on the field and he's the quarterback for the team. And the quarterback has to, they got to not only call the play, but they got to execute the play. They got to make sure it's all working. We're all on the same team and we got to drive this. Is this a movement or is this a moment, Ken? Do we have the sort of, do we have the team around us where something different has happened and it's not just a bunch of reports and conversations and a nice, pretty report that goes on somebody's desk? Is this a movement or a moment?
It's got to be a movement and not a moment, because what separates moments from movements is action and sacrifice and putting in the work. I think under the leadership of the board, it makes my life easier as being the quarterback, as you say, to attach actions to declarations of policy intent. When you say racism is a public health crisis, immediately I'm gonna say to my team, what we're gonna do about it through actions. And that means bringing forth proposals that contain actions to change the circumstances. We felt better about health disparities, quite frankly, because we talked about the social determinants of health. The social determinants of health, when you really want to get real about it, it's about poverty and the stress that's associated with poverty. It's about having a lack of affordable housing. It's about having a lack of jobs that pay a living wage. So it is our job as public leaders to approve policies that facilitate the creation of living wage jobs, that facilitate the creation of entrepreneurship opportunities, so that people can become their own boss and have the ability to control their own destiny. But we've seen through COVID-19 that poor communities, communities of color, make up a smaller percentage of the population, yet they make up a larger percentage of those that are hospitalized or whose lives have been lost. So it's what you're gonna do about it to create access to healthcare and access to income, because we all know zip codes determine life expectancy. There's something wrong with that.
Yeah.
And,
oh, go ahead, Beryl. Jump in.
I was going to say also opportunity. I'm thinking when Kevin introduced me, I'm sorry, when I walked into my family room and the TV was on and I saw that Justice Ginsburg had passed, I was, I guess, shocked for a moment. As I've shared, I've known her. But my very existence and opportunity being on the Supreme Court press corps, being part of the Supreme Court press corps, was because people helped me along the way. And if we don't get opportunity, doors open, and each one reach one, each one teach one, then those opportunities don't come about. It's challenging when you are the first, because not only are you walking through the doors and you better be prepared, but you've got to have staying power so that there's somebody else behind you that can come along the way and do the same thing. So I'm just sharing that by way of an example to say education is, I mean, I know you all know this, I'm just saying this, education about the opportunities, and then having somebody help you along the way to get to the next step so that you and that individual can be put in a position of influence and power to make those decisions that was just shared, or everybody has said that to some extent, to just take us along the way, because otherwise we're in a subordinate situation, or we're in a position where we don't have. And historically, just economically, it's been challenging for people of color to get ahead. You know, you can only live in you live in one by the same house in one neighborhood, and then somebody else buys it in another neighborhood, and your house doesn't appreciate at the same rate as theirs. I mean, it's just recurrent. And so I'm just saying, each one, teach one, help one, so that we can get to the place where we are more on equal footing, and that we have this mindset of supporting each other. It's too lopsided, which is why you got the 1% at the top of the pyramid.
But you raise a really interesting point, though, and I think it's a good segue into keeping with this conversation around race, and that's around the wealth distribution. The way we are set up in terms of economics. And I know, Clerk O'Shaughnessy, you have been always conscientious of who you hire, but I presume that also works in contracting, and it works in your vendors. And I know that's limited with the clerk's office, but it's something that if each of us start to invest in that mentality, I think that's when the needle starts to move. Because I really feel like my greatest concern is that the wealth gap is growing. And so for minorities, for women, and for minority women, we are just not seeing the kind of catch up that we're seeing with education. More Black women are becoming more educated, but their pay is still, the pay gap is still growing. you know, and that's the systemic piece that we have to begin to really zero in on. And I wonder, you know, what about all these companies that are, you know, Netflix and Chase and the NFL, they're all dedicating hundreds of $millions of dollars. Do you feel like that's really going to be, is that the way to redistribute wealth? Is that the way to really sort of rebuild this conversation? Ken, let me start with you.
If it's invested in sustainable ways, it must be invested in communities in such a way that is not like coming in for a one-time food giveaway. It must be invested in ways to build communities up through taking those dollars and create equity in communities through home ownership opportunities. It must be invested in ways to create small businesses that create an ecosystem as has been discussed, because you cannot close the wealth gap if you continue to put dollars on only one side of the scale.
Yeah.
You know, that scale is never going to even begin to move towards any kind of equity. You got to have racial equity in order to have true economic equity. And these investments have to also be made realizing that there is a difference between equality and equity, because everyone starts in different places. Therefore, you cannot just give every child in an inner city school the same size shoe and expect them to run.
Right.
You must be strategic and thoughtful in the ways that these corporations are thinking about making investments.
And I think the biggest, I'll just add to that I think the biggest way that we can do that is, I mean, I was asked a question last night and it was the same answer, is investing directly in businesses, you know, because that's where you get a lot of hangups, is hiring, is contracting, and being able to then get the credit and the loans that come with sort of doing those things. And, you know, and it ranges from redlining to how credit scores are generated. And I just think that if I hear what you're saying about the, you know, with the meaningful things they do that's just sustainable, but we really have to rethink this conversation. You know, in 1619, the first African slaves were brought to America. And from that point on, it started entire hundreds of years of generations of a slave trade where Africans, Black people, were brought to this country for free and slave and bondage labor. And then we were enlightened. You know, the country began to change when the Civil War happened. I'm paraphrasing all this, and we, you know, slavery ended, but the mentality stayed, you know, of that you are not equal. And remember, we've been out of slavery, we've been out of enslavement less years as a country than we were in slavery years as a country. We've only been out of, you know, slavery's only not existed for 150 something odd years, maybe 157, 8, 9 years, something like that. I do my math later, but you get the point. And so, Beryl, I mean, you know, we're at a point where I think America is woke, quote unquote woke. That's what the young folks say, woke, you know, woke. I think America is woke, but I go back to Angel Tyree's question. You know, I think we're in a movement, but it is up to folks like you and I and everybody that are watching and that care to do their part to make sure that it becomes a movement and change. And that means, you know, if you're putting money into, you know, businesses, you know, yes, consider minority-owned businesses, you know, and try and make an effort to support those businesses, you know, whether it's a bank, a retail store, or even the barbershop, you know, I mean, all of those things, or a coffee shop, or whatever, all those things. But Beryl, I mean, what else can we do in this conversation around race? And what can we do as a community? What should we do going forward, to Angel's question?
Okay, well, there are several things in my mind. I agree with you that people are woke, but not everybody is accepting. Some people are just waking
absolutely
up.
Absolutely agree.
It's an incremental approach. So
agreed.
One thing I think you alluded to, or maybe
and this election may tell us a little bit about the broader perspective in this country.
Exactly. If we could each do in our corner of the world something to move the needle forward. So that's even conversations one-on-one. That's speaking. I mean, that's one of the things I'm feel called and led to do, to speak about experiences, to talk, and these are tough conversations to have, because not everybody wants to talk about, I'm not racist, you know, what have you. So to be able to talk about and explain the background of what's so that people can begin to have a series of aha moments and come to the realization of what's what. So I want to segue from that. I mean, it's related. This racism is even in the laws.
Oh, yeah.
A judge I worked with after I finished law school is Leon Higginbotham. He was on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. One of his books is called Race, an American Legal Process. And it's from 1619 to 1776. He has other books as well. But the point is that book illustrated how from 1619, laws were created, policies promulgated, so that the what they now call Anglo-American law could stand, and the sense of superiority, inferiority could be perpetuated. And in that perpetuation, everything else has been built and based on that, as well as the fact, I find it interesting, since Pocahontas married a Caucasian, even though she's of color, there was a Pocahontas exception. Oh, she's okay. You like her, she and her descendants, they're cool. All right, everybody else, if you're of color, well, you're gonna have to go through or live by these laws that are written. So our legal system is based on Anglo-American law based. And unless you take a class with a teacher that gives you a different perspective in law school, you don't know that, you're not thinking about the differences because you don't live it every day. You don't see how that is. And then policy is made also, or can be made, depends on who's making the policy, that also inculcates that mindset. So these are the things that in groups I talk with people about, or one-on-one talk with people about, so that we can begin to see each other from the perspective of how this country was built. It's a great country, but you know what? Even though it's a great country, we're evolving. We're constantly evolving. And the other thing to take into consideration is that with the growth of our country, it's getting more brown. And getting more brown,
it is.
Getting more brown is a conversation for some people.
Yeah. Maryellen, you want to add to that? You look like you got something you want to add to that.
Beryl, you're just, you're wonderful. I was thinking about educational processes and considering the fact that I'm 70 years old and graduated from high school in 1968.
Wait, go back. What was that you said? Wait, go back. What?
No,
hey, you look good though. Let me tell you something. You one of the baddest 70-year-olds I've ever seen. Okay, you look great. You look great.
Thank you. I think your mom and me were the same age, aren't we?
No, my mom's a little older than you. Just a few years. My mom's like 72, 73. Okay,
well, we're close. Anyway. Yeah. But going back to this whole educational thing, we have moments. We talk about the woke moments, right? So you realize what you didn't learn in school when you're my age. There's plenty. It just goes on and on and on. I was at my husband, Tim Farron, was moderating a discussion about a guy who was talking about governmental redlining, and how it was inculcated by the government. I mean, there are things I didn't know. I just thought Upper Arlington was the crappy place that decided that, you know, Black folks and Jewish folks and, you know, couldn't come in. But no, it was our government actually made it happen. And this guy wrote this book, and I was listening to this, and I came back angry. I thought, you know, how dare they decide when I was growing up who I got to play with, you know? And you know, why did it take, you know, for me to get out of high school to be able to broaden my horizons and to understand how other people live? Well, you know, why did they keep us in the dark on so many things? And you have moments of anger, you know, as just a white folk who feels like, you know, we were cheated too. You know, we were cheated because we didn't get the broad diversity, you know, that inclusion gives us. And so we have to work really hard to make it a movement and to make sure that we give those opportunities to every kid. Who would have known that Uppity Arlington, where Uppity Arlington High School is, was actually a graveyard for the family, the African-American family that settled that whole area. No history there. Now they know, and they say they're going to teach it. However, I grew up there. I had no idea of these early settlers. You know,
it's 4 o'clock.
It's amazing, and we again need to have these difficult discussions and talk about these difficult things and do a better job of reaching out and honestly call us out when we do stupid.
So it's 4 o'clock. I'm sorry I cut you off. This has been a great conversation. We're going to cut off in a second. So I want to make sure I don't do that without saying thank you to my guests. This has been, I think, a very important conversation. And I think you said something that really stood out to me, Maryellen O'Shaughnessy, and that's that, you know, you had to broaden your horizons when you went off from high school to college, and you broadened your horizons. And that's the real kind of change that is the catalyst to real change in this movement, where each of us as individuals enlightens ourselves, and we learn and we grow and we invest in that. And you know, you know, someone said, you know, you got pepper sprayed. I got in, it's 4 o'clock now, so we're getting, but you got pepper sprayed. I said, you know what? That is a contribution to the conversation. You know, yeah, it was a painful moment and frustrating and made me angry, but it's a contribution to the moment that allows for the movement to begin, you know. And so that picture was all across the country. You know, I got thousands and thousands of calls and emails and texts, and, you know, and from people, you know, it was in the USA Today. It was in, I just everywhere. And the point I'm making is that's an important part of the equation for the conversation to be meaningful. And so Franklin County, you heard it here once again, another great brotherly and even sisterly conversation about health, wealth, and race right here in Central Ohio. We're going to be back here, same time, same place next week, Wednesday, 3 o'clock. I need to hear from you because I'm trying to figure out, should I keep going with this or should I not? Yeah. Should I shave the beard? I don't know, you know, so I need your input. I need to hear from you so that we know. So, and remember, you got 24 hours for the census. What was that?
Watch the court, what happens. And that's part of voting, because the president of the United States always picks when he has an opportunity, maybe it's one day
crucial.
The Supreme Court justices who make the determinations for the highest court in the land.
Yep. Well, thank you, everybody. What you want to say something, Ken, to close out?
I just said we're talking about lifetime appointments when we talk about the Supreme Court.
Yeah. And their opinion matters, you know, for a lifetime. So, hey, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you back here, same time, same place, for a brotherly conversation about health, wealth, and race in Franklin County. Y'all have a great week. Stay safe out there.
Thank you.